I think leadership is most powerful when you realize as a leader that sometimes you lead in front, sometimes you lead behind, and sometimes you lead standing side by side. And I don't think a position, a title makes you a leader or not. There are people who are very junior in their careers. There are people on college campuses. There are people, um, in different walks of life, and they naturally lead. And I think part of leadership, and the thing that I have been told about my leadership style is that I can see the best in people, and I encourage that best to come out.
This episode of Leading the Future of Work is sponsored by HiBob. If you're stuck in a rut with all this new world of work, quiet quitting, remote work, talent retention stuff, then you've got to meet Bob. Bob is a modern HR platform from HiBob that is built for the way companies need to work today. It's simple and intuitive. You can customize, automate, and create workflows for onboarding in a click. And there's more. If you are a multinational global company, you can also customize just about anything, including calendars, holidays, currency, and regulations. Connect with HiBob and see what Bob can do for your company. They also created a free guide to bridge the global gap and adapt to the modern world, which covers using the right technology, inclusivity, and using modern HR tools. You can get access to this free guide at hibob.com/FOW. Again, that's www.hibob.com/FOW. My guest today is Lisa Osborne Ross, Edelman's US CEO, and recently she has been ranked on the Forbes 50 over 50. Lisa, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Well, first, congratulations on all these wonderful accomplishments. I hear all the wonderful things that you're doing, so congrats.
Thank you. Thank you. The 50 over 50 was interesting for me because I had to remember that I was over 50. And it was a very real reminder that I'm actually well over 50. So just entering another phase in my life and my career, and it was a nice way to start my new decade.
Yeah, very cool. Well, why don't we start with a little bit of background information about you? So before you became CEO of Edelman in the United States, what were you doing much younger in your career or even much younger in your life as far as where you were raised, how you grew up?
I'm one of these people, this is my favorite question because it gives me a chance to pay homage to my parents. I'm a native Washingtonian, and I grew up in Washington when it was accurately referred to as Chocolate City. It was a bastion of Black excellence. My dad worked for the first elected mayor of Washington, D.C., Walter Washington. My mother, when she retired, was the highest ranking woman of color in what was then HEW. I have three older brothers, and my parents are HBCU grads who met at Howard University, who believed that, there's that adage, to whom much is given, much is expected. My parents' point of view was, if you have anything, you should give it back.
Yeah.
And they raised us literally to believe that we could do well financially, we could live comfortable lives, but we also had to simultaneously give back and make a difference in society and make a difference in our communities. And I really feel like, Jacob, everything that I have done in my life, my personal and professional trajectory has been rooted in those beliefs that my parents instilled.
And that, it sounds like, carried you through your career to achieve professional success.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was educated in high school by feminist nuns.
Wow.
I went to an all-girls prep school, and that might sound crazy, but Sister Mary Claire, who was our head mistress, made very clear to us that as women, we had a responsibility to change the world. As women, we had the power to change the world. They were feminist before anybody was even talking about feminism, particularly for Catholic nuns, who told us that we could not cheer for the boys' school because we could cheer for our own girls.
Wow.
I went on from Immaculata, went to Marquette University, Jesuit institution, again, consistent with how I was raised, that service matters and you make a difference. And from Marquette, I came back home and I tried to make a difference and do well at the same time.
How much of how people are raised do you think contributes to their success?
Oh my
Because
God.
there's some people who are raised in very difficult circumstances and situations who become successful, and there are other people who are raised in more fortunate situations and also become successful. So when you reflect on your life and how you grew up, do you think you would have ended up a completely different person had those circumstances been different?
If you ask me, I have an answer. If you ask my parents, they will say no.
Hmm.
My parents were very excited and happy to say that regardless of where they sent me to school, regardless of how I was raised, that I was going to be this person. One of my favorite stories about my father was, I was the youngest of. I had three older brothers. My parents were in their 40s when they had me. I was a surprise.
Wow.
They were delighted to have a girl, and for most of my life, my father was like, "Oh my God, what have I done here? This is miraculous." And definitely a daddy's girl but I had my mother to balance. And my father's favorite line was, my mother would say, "You keep it up, Lisa, and you're going to end up in a women's penitentiary."
Oh my
And my dad would say, "She might be there, but she's going to be running that shit." And so,
God.
so, it's a nature nurture thing. I think that how I was raised was such a gift for me. But I know people who were not raised as I was, and they are enormously personally and professionally successful. I know people who were raised who I was, and they're incredibly unhappy.
Yeah.
And they are not living fulfilled, purpose filled lives. So I think everything is a combination of nature and nurture. And I think everything's a combination of love and luck. It's a little bit of
Yeah.
both.
It seems like it's kind of a combination of how you approach it and the,
Yeah,
the mindset
yeah,
that you have going into it.
exactly, exactly.
It's funny. I have a 6-year-old, and so I'm as well. I have two kids, a 2-year-old son and a 6-year-old girl, and I'm
Okay.
trying to kind of at that same mentality of she's going to be running the penitentiary. Sometimes she does things. She can be very creative and manipulative in getting how she wants, and so I'm always trying to be aware of like, do you punish her or get upset because she's doing something that she's not supposed to be doing? Or do you encourage the creative side of how she's able to figure out a way to get what she wants? And so sometimes I try to balance that and I say, Naomi, you're not supposed to do that. But that was a very creative way to kind of get what you wanted out of your teachers. So I'm trying to balance those things because the creativity, the ingenuity of being able to get things in this world, I think,
Yeah,
especially for a young girl, is very important to nurture instead of
yeah.
just saying, don't do that. Like, just listen all the time. So my wife and I are always really, really trying to balance that.
You channel it.
Yeah.
The reason I feel some security in giving parental advice, I have a soon to be 31-year-old
Wow.
son who was recently described as a chef of some renown. And I have a 29-year-old daughter who is a change maker. She's a change agent and she works for the Census Bureau. And both of my children were interesting, and in any direction their behavior could have gone. But what we tried to do was channel, like they had natural skills. And sometimes they were hard to manage, but it's like, how do you channel that so that they can be who they are, but be who they are for the sake of goodness?
Yeah. It almost sounds like leading a team is similar, right? Like,
Yeah.
channeling the strengths and the skills that people on your team have and being able to kind of unlock that. So let's talk a little bit about your approach to leadership and maybe how do you remember the first leadership role you ever had in your career and what that was like?
My career or my life? I think my first leadership role was, when I was 5 years old in Miss Elliott's elementary school. Uh, and, this goes to your point, right? Like, are you born like this or are you taught? And it's a combination of the two. I think leadership is most powerful when you realize as a leader that sometimes you lead in front, sometimes you lead behind, and sometimes you lead standing side by side.
Hmm.
And I don't think a position, a title makes you a leader or
Yeah.
not. There are people who are very junior in their careers. There are people on college campuses. There are people, um, in different walks of life, and they naturally lead. And I think part of leadership, and the thing that I have been told about my leadership style, is that I can see the best in people and I encourage that best to come out. And I'm pretty good at setting goals, but I also understand that, Jacob, the way you might approach something might be terribly different from the way that I approach it. And one is not better than the other, they're just different.
Mm.
And all of those skills are necessary to marshal an outcome. And it's why we all embrace diversity of opinion, representation, because you need different points of view and you need different types of people
Yeah.
to come to an outcome that's going to be materially beneficial to a wide range of people. So I think leadership is, you can lead at any level. And I think teams are about finding the best in people and bringing that out. And I feel like I've been thinking a lot. This 50 over 50 was interesting for me, right? And so I've been thinking a lot about my life and my trajectory and how I got here and what's next for me. And I think I fundamentally believe that there's a time and a place for everything. I've said that there was a time where I exceeded the goals that other people set for me. There
Hmm.
was a time where there was this interesting concept of leaning in several years ago. There was a time when I leaned back, never out, but I
Yeah.
leaned back because I had to take care of, an ailing mother, and my children really, really needed me. And I think now it is about building legacy. It is about impact. It's about integrity. It's about transparency. Things that I think were always there for me, but I now have the freedom, psychologically, spiritually, title wise, to really lean into those things that are most important to me. I have no idea whether I answered your question about teams, but that all came to me and I just shared it.
Yeah, and so hearing you talk, I forgot to ask. So, you said you have a 31-year-old daughter, so it sounds like you had kids fairly young.
I love that about you. 31-year-old son,
Yeah.
and 29-year-old daughter. I don't, age is relative. I find myself saying that a lot lately. Uh, age is relative, but yeah, I've been married for 34 years on
Wow.
November 5th. And that's the other thing that, again, I'm super reflective right now. Work has always been important to me, but it's not the most important thing to me.
Mm.
My 34-year marriage is really important to me.
Yeah.
My children are really important to me. The role I play in my community, the voice that I am for many, those are things that are really important to me. And my work is incredibly important, but it's not my life.
Yeah, yeah, and I asked because my mom had me when she was very young. I think she was 18 or 19, so I had Russian immigrant parents. And so
Ah,
my parents are 10 years apart. My dad's 10 years older. So
wow.
I was born when obviously my mom was very young. And I'm curious if that impacted or influenced your career trajectory in any way. Do you feel that maybe it was harder? Was it more motivating to have kids at a younger age? And I asked my mom the same question too.
I wasn't that young when I had my kids. I was in my late 20s.
Okay.
But I do think this goes to your first question, and you can tell just in what you shared about your parents. I do think how you were raised has an impact on how you see the world. And I think the people that raised you. So as I've indicated, my parents were two very successful professional people, but they were also Black people in the 60s and 70s, and it wasn't that easy. And my parents were the most remarkable role models to me because my mother, I lost my dad the year I graduated from college, but growing up, my parents were like this dashing couple who worked really, really hard, and God knows what pain and challenges they dealt with internally, being people of color, your parents being immigrants. Who knows what pain that they were dealing with, but they were the president of the PTA and the girls and boys, the Cub Scouts, and they were active
Hmm.
in our faith community, and they just did it. And so it is it's how I have sought to live my life. I saw my parents doing everything, and as you know, sometimes it's at cost.
Yeah.
But I saw my parents being remarkable parents, being remarkable citizens, and being remarkable professionals. And as you probably now know, that's hard to manage all of that. But you do what you have to do.
Yeah, you do. I mean, my dad, getting to your comment on pain, he doesn't even want to talk about his past. He refuses.
Yes.
So
Mm,
he grew up in the former USSR, the Republic of Georgia is
mm.
where he was born. And it's actually where I proposed to my wife because we went there
Oh,
to visit.
lovely.
So I went back there with my mom, my grandmother, my aunt, and my dad refuses to
Oh,
go back. He doesn't even, he speaks Georgian fluently, but he refuses to speak the language. Like that's how upset he was. Because
yeah.
they were,
Wow.
they're Jewish, and so they were persecuted
Yes.
for being Jewish, and it was just a complete disaster. And he will not talk about his childhood. My
Mm.
family knows very little about his past, and he just does not want to bring it up. So, yeah,
And
it's
you have to
tough.
respect that, but that makes him who he is, and
Yeah,
that obviously influences the father and the grandfather
yeah,
that he is.
yeah, definitely. Um, so, getting back to leadership, what was your first formal leadership role at an organization?
Uh, I think probably when I was probably when I went to the White House. I had been at Fleischman Hillard. I'd done some interesting things. Was a part of some really interesting accounts. But when I went to the White House in the Clinton administration, I first went in working for Bob Reich as a comms director in the Department of Labor. I then went to uh, uh, the White House. And then I worked, I was the deputy director of the Federal Glass Ceiling Commission, and that
Okay.
was a leadership position. And then I went to the White House and was chief of staff of the White House Women's Office. And so I think that trajectory was the first time that I was in a recognized leadership role. And I learned a lot in those jobs. And I say that what I found most helpful when I worked in those capacities was it's not how smart you are. It's not how hard you work. It is how valuable you are to an institution. And this is going to be corny as hell. It's also like, how are you to work with?
Yeah.
What is it like to work with you? Do you inspire people? Are they excited about coming to work? Do they feel that they can share their hopes and dreams with you and that you can get them to the other side of wherever they're trying to go? Do you lead by example? Do you say something in a meeting and then do you carry it out afterwards? Do you talk about people in a way that's not constructive or helpful or additive? And so I think in those jobs, and interestingly, my children, so I was also a young mother at the time. And I think there was a parallel with the way I was trying to run my household
Mm-hmm.
with honesty and transparency and being aspirational always, like feeling I could do better and better and better. And then at work I was doing the same thing of looking at my career but looking at the career path of others and helping them to get to the other side of where they wanted to be in a way that they could sleep good at night, they could sleep well at night knowing they had done
Yeah.
it with integrity and with professional expertise and they had given it everything. And when you've given it everything, you can sleep well at night. And so I think when I was in those jobs, those are the first official leadership roles that I had, and those are the things that I learned.
Did you ever get any formal leadership training in those roles, or were you just hired and you had to kind of figure things out on your own?
No, it's a great question. I'm sure that at some point during my 7 years with the Clinton administration that I had some type of training,
Okay.
but it's not. We don't pay enough attention to training. Training is important. I look at Edelman now, and when I was at Ogilvy before, and Fleischman Hillard before that, and in all of my jobs, we promote people because they're good at their jobs. But we don't think about with that promotion and they start managing people, are they also good with their people?
Mm-hmm.
And that's significant. And I think that anytime you are promoted into a more senior role, along with getting the training of, professional integrity or financial acumen and personnel, that we should be taught how to lead. And
Yeah.
there's a difference between leading and managing. You can be taught how to manage with management training, but leading is very, very different.
Yeah. What? is the difference? Because I'm sure a lot of people are now thinking, all right, well, what is the difference between management and leadership, managing and leading?
If you and I worked together and I was in a position of seniority to you and I was responsible for your well-being, your professional well-being, managing is you come into work, you and I set a goal. You get your, I say make 12 widgets. You make those 12 widgets. You have a question about how to make the widget. I answer the question. When you finish with your widget making, you come back and I give you 12 more. So I'm managing you through a process.
Yep.
Leadership is Jacob. Let's talk about the widgets. Uh, is this what you want to do? Do you think you're a great widget maker? Um, I think you're good here, but you probably could be a little stronger here. Let me show you how to excel at your widget making, and then also let's have a conversation about what's next after you lead the widgets, after you make the widgets, and simultaneously, I'm saying, Jacob, watch me.
Yeah.
I'm making widgets, but I'm also doing these other things. And if you have questions about what I'm doing, ask me. But I'm also going to say to you, hey, watch me in this circumstance, in these situations. What did you learn? What do you think I did well? And I'm going to lead you to another spot. And I'm going to challenge you on how you're making the widgets. Are you making them in a sustainable way? Are you being kind to other people? Are you being respectful to other people? Are you respecting yourself while you're making these widgets? That's leadership. Management is like, make your widgets, good job, go home.
Yeah, it sounds like kind of the phrase that came to mind is that management is more along the lines of getting people to do more, but leadership is more around helping people become more.
Yes. Why didn't you say that? That was better than my widget story. That was great.
It just popped into my mind as you were going over the widgets.
I inspired you. Look, I'm going to take some credit for that because that was sharp and tight. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good quote. I got to remember that. I'm going to write that
Yeah.
down afterwards.
I'm glad I said it.
You talked about purpose earlier. What is your purpose? Like your personal purpose?
I think about my epithet. I wanted to say, and right now I'm trending in the right direction. I wanted to say, extraordinary daughter. I wanted to say, remarkable mother, solid wife, like working on it, solid wife, and skilled, thoughtful practitioner that cared about others and helped other people to reach their goals. That's what I think about. So my purpose is my listen, again, I'm super corny today. I mentioned that I went to Marquette University. Our motto is be the difference.
Yeah.
So I want to be the difference. My purpose is to be the difference and to be the difference for good.
This episode is sponsored by HiBob. Remember what people want today in the future of work. They want to feel connected and like they belong to the company. Bob, the HR platform from HiBob, does just that. Bob is the modern HR platform for how you and your people work today. Check them out and get access to a free guide they just released, which covers using the right technology, inclusivity, and modern HR tools at highbob.com/FOW. Again, that's www.highbob.com/FOW. Do you think that's a morbid way? Like why think about, the gravestone when you've passed away? Some people might say, Lisa, why do you think about that? That seems like such a morbid and sad thing. But does it help you contextualize your life and being in the present when you think about the end?
It's funny. I am remarkably good at being in the present, but I recognize that if you start, you have to finish. And so for almost any project, think about this, Jacob. When you and I started this conversation, I said at the end of this, you'll feel good about what? So I think the way I naturally process any engagement is if at the end, what's the outcome? At the end, what are we working toward? And same thing I asked you about this interview. At the end of this interview, you will feel good about what? And so for me, at the end of my life, which may be whenever, but at the end, how do I want to be recalled and remembered? And what's lovely, because I'm on track for everything that I wanted to do. I feel like I am making a difference in my community. I feel like I'm making a difference in my industry, in my agency. I had a major coup this morning, Jacob. I was on a call with my other global CEOs, and I redirected something, and I hung up the phone. I called my chief of staff, and I was like, "I did it! Yes, yes, yes! I moved us in a different direction," and that inspires me. I get so excited about that. And so, and that's the present, but yeah.
It seems like you're a high achiever. Is that well? Because I'm asking because a lot of people who listen to this podcast would consider themselves as high achievers. They're productive, they're
Uh-huh.
efficient, they lead, they get things done. But sometimes people can get burned out from that. It's a very hard thing to maintain, and sometimes it can take away from things that you're doing in your personal life. How do you maintain that level of high achievement and accomplishing your goals while not getting burned out or exhausted or drained or stressed? What does that balance look like for you?
Okay, to be clear, I get exhausted, burned out, and stressed.
Okay.
I do. It's natural, but I have always been good about balancing them out. I've always been, and particularly, I think since my children became adults and I just had more time,
Yeah.
I'm much better about self care. I'm much better about, like, I find life joyful, as difficult as it is. And God knows it is hard. It's
Yep.
been particularly hard for the past 3 years, but I have always been able, and I think it's a coping mechanism. I think it's how I survive, to find the joy in an experience and to find the positive in an experience. But I am able to balance. I no one I'm again, I've said before, I love my job, but my job is not my life. And even when I was raising my children, they were super important to me, but I couldn't raise them to believe that they were the center of the universe, because then they would be like little shitty people when they grew up. So, I couldn't do that either. But I'm greedy. I just figured out the answer to your question, Jacob. I'm greedy. I want it all. And so I have figured out a way to feed myself with all of the things that I care about, but I recognize, I'm going to have a bad day.
Yeah.
I like the good ones. And so obviously, if I like the good ones, I'm going to try to have more of them. And if the bad days don't feel good, clearly I'm going to work hard to minimize those. So I think it's a matter of, I think it's just natural. It's just nature.
How do you deal with the bad days or with the failure? Or maybe do you even have a story of a difficult time or failure or something like that happened to you professionally, that how you had to get through it and what you did?
I have three ways to respond to that. President Obama, midway through his term, said something that I have found to be so true, that when something fabulous happens, it's never as good as it seems. And when something terrible happens, it's never as bad as it seems. So I think I intuitively feel like that, but hearing it articulated, I was like, that's absolutely right.
Yeah.
Second way to answer that question, I had a retreat with my operating committee at my house a couple of months back. And because of COVID, it was the first time, and because I was new in office, it was the first time we pulled everyone together.
Okay.
This has been hard for folks. We've financially done really well, but it's been hard. And I asked the question, what do you need when you're in the trenches, from all of your colleagues? So these are like 25 people that run the US at Edelman. And I said, each one of you go around, and when you're down and out, what do you need from your colleagues? And my chief of staff said, I need what I already get from Lisa, and that is perspective, that none of this is life or death. None of this is life or death. So that's the second thing that I do to keep myself balanced. Like, it's just not life or death.
Yeah.
Um,
It can feel like
Early
it
in my
does sometimes. I think
Oh yeah,
that's
it
the
can, but
problem.
it's not. It Of course it feels like it, and so you want to surround yourself with people that lift you up, and people that support you, and people who tell you the truth. And it's just, it's not. You asked for a story. Early in my career as the head of the Washington office, I took on a piece of work that I felt personally very strongly about, but it was a very controversial piece of work. Um, Long story short, my colleagues pretty much nationwide disagreed with my decision.
Hmm.
There was a lot of bad press. I was dragged personally and professionally, um,
Wow.
and um, and I was down. It was really really hard. And then I said to myself, I have to respect other people's points of view, even though mine is so strong. And I have to learn from this, and I have to find a way to be a better leader as a result of it. But it was quite challenging. But I came through it, and I feel like I'm a better decision maker as a result of it.
So when you say dragged through the mud, how bad was it? Was it just I disagree with you, Lisa, or was it you're an idiot, you shouldn't be leading, you're the worst? Like how bad were the critics and the naysayers for you?
Well, I didn't say dragged through the mud. I just said
Oh,
dragged.
dragged. Okay.
I was dragged. It was in like over a 72-hour period. I was in news outlets like the New York Times and the Journal and Politico and Axios for Chicago Tribune.
Wow.
So that was publicly very difficult.
All
Um,
negative.
all negative, all negative. Well, it depends. It's funny. Again, because people have different points of view. For many people, they saw my point of view. They were like, yes, do that work. Other people were like, no, don't do that work. But for someone in my position to be in the paper for things like that. So professionally, it was very difficult. And then there were threats on my life
Oh,
because
wow, it
people
got that
said these
extreme.
things. Yeah, it got that extreme that people, sent notes to our office. And people sent a note to my home and said, you're a bad person and bad things are going to happen to you. And that was hard. And that's not the first or the last time that something like that has happened to me. That was because of a decision, but it has also happened to me because I'm a woman of color in a very senior position. So those things happen. But that's the world. But as I've said before, it's not my world.
Yeah.
My world is my family, my community, the difference that I'm making. And so when I stay centered in that space, I'm strong enough and was strong enough to get through that in other types of things.
How do you stay centered in that space? Do you have practices, rituals that you use? Is it meditation? Like, um, how do you make sure that you have that in that perspective?
One, I'm a voracious reader,
Okay.
and I get lost in a really good audio book.
Not
Um,
non-business book or business book?
No, Jacob, you could name every business book that's been on the New York Times bestseller, and I promise you, I've not read one of them.
Okay.
But you go to the other side of that list about what everybody else is reading, I promise you, I probably have read all of those.
Hmm.
So I am a voracious reader. I spend a lot of time with my family. I live in a beautiful place, and so I hike a lot. I go to the beach when I can. I have an extraordinarily wonderful group of friends that I enjoy, and this is so lame. And I'm not going to look at my marketing person who's sitting across from me during this. I shop. I shop like it's my retail, like serious retail therapy. I
Yeah.
shop. Yeah. And listen, I didn't talk about this. My faith is important to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I mentioned that, I went to an all girls prep school with Sister Mary Claire. I went to Marquette University. My faith grounds me very, very much. And it is a stabilizing force in my life.
And do you have any particular rituals or practices that you do? For example, do you make a priority to always do a date night or to do dinners with family together or to be out of work at a certain time? Or do you do you control and plan those days like that?
I do. I try not to work on my birthday.
Okay.
I am extraordinarily protective of my off time.
Okay.
Uh, and I'm extraordinarily protective of my colleagues' off time too. So when I'm on vacation. And one time a colleague said, "What if the building is burning?" I was like, "There is nothing I can do about that, so don't call me about that either." Uh, But and so I protect my time. I try not to work when I don't feel well. If I'm sick, I definitely don't come to work. And I think by protecting my time, I'm also modeling to my colleagues, you can and should do this too. At Edelman, we, like many other organizations, have leaned a lot into the mental health and well-being of our
Yeah.
colleagues. We recognize World Mental Health Day. The volume of email I get on the difference that that has made for people. Again, I protect my well-being and I try to do the same for others. We have increased our benefits, and 2 weeks ago, I got a letter from a woman that made me sob, who talked about the fact that she was dealing with a crisis in her family. And because of these increased benefits, she had the security of knowing that she could handle her business and not be
Mm.
worried about, of course, not losing her job,
Yeah.
but losing her spot in her place. My husband of 34 years just retired, although I'm not supposed to use that word. He is no longer working in his place of employment. And the joy that he brings to every day is infectious for me.
Mm.
And we do have dates. And after 34 years, this man can make me giggle like a schoolgirl. And I love it. I spend time with my children. I'm active in my sorority. I'm an AKA, Alpha Kappa Alpha, same as the vice president. So, like, I have a pretty full life, but I protect my time, I protect myself, and I try to do the same for others.
So you try not to do a lot of work on the weekends, late nights.
I mean, if I have to, sometimes I have to, a crisis occurs and I can't say, I'm
Yeah.
off. But I also have learned to distinguish between a crisis and a problem.
Hmm.
And sometimes it's a problem, and a problem can wait. And a crisis you have to deal with immediately, but sometimes you have
Yeah.
to help people define what an actual crisis is. But yeah, I'm protective of myself and my time, but I also give 200%, and I enjoy giving 200%. But, like, no one owns me,
Hmm.
so I'm not available to anyone at all times. Anyone?
I like that approach of differentiating between a problem and a crisis. I think one of the
Yes,
challenges that a lot of people have is every problem feels like a crisis.
yes,
Um,
yes,
and it was
yes,
funny.
and it's not.
Yeah, I had that feeling the other day. I can't remember what I was doing. I was doing something, and it was like these little things were coming up, and I'm like, damn it, I'm like, I'm never gonna figure this out. And then I randomly took a break and I went on social media, and there's a show that we really like, my wife and I really like on Amazon, called Catastrophe. I don't know if you've seen it or heard of it.
I haven't.
And one of the actors is Rob, what's his name, Mulvaney.
Uh,
And I randomly came across this thing that he was talking about. And he wrote this book how he lost a child like years ago when he was the child was 3 years old, had a brain tumor, and the child ended up passing away. And he wrote this book. I think it's called A
mm,
Heart That Works, like
mm,
unsolicited promotion. I think it's coming out in like a couple of weeks. And I saw that, and I saw this interview that he was giving on like talking about his child that passed away and honoring the memory. And I was thinking about my problems, and
yeah, perspective.
I'm like, wow, like the fact that I can't, I don't know what it was, like something dumb with a technology. I'm like, who the hell freaking cares? Like my kids are healthy, we can afford to live where we live, we have a roof over our head, we have food, and it's like I'm worrying about like this kind of stuff when there are people out there that have actual problems. And one of the benefits of having parents who came from that immigrant mentalities, they grew
Mhm.
up with nothing, they were dirt poor, no money, didn't speak the language. And so sometimes I remind myself, I put like the context that I'm going, the problems that I have into perspective, because it's just pales in comparison to what other people are going through.
Yeah, it's perspective, right? And it's also generosity of spirit,
Yeah.
and it's also exposure. So if you sat in this beautiful room that I've already talked about, but if you sat here all day and just did your work, you would be so unaware of the world around you.
Hmm.
And you wouldn't have that perspective, which is why it's so important to engage in the world around you, to be with people who are different than you are, spend time with people who disagree with you. It just broadens your worldview, and it makes you a better, stronger, more interesting, and a more empathetic person.
Yeah.
But at the same time, and I had a friend say this to me one time. I was beating myself up about feeling badly about something because, like, the world was imploding. And she said, yes, but pain is relative. And
Yeah.
if that's what you feel, that's what you feel. Don't water it. But if that's what you feel, that's what you feel. And she also shared, I think this is another thing I was thinking about in terms of like the balance. How do I stay balanced? I also firmly believe that if something is meant for me, I'm going to have it.
No.
And if it's not, there is nothing that me or anybody else can do to deliver it. And so when I release myself to the universe of, look, I'll do the best I can, and what's going to happen is going to happen, then, you kind of free yourself up from
Mhm.
a lot of challenge and a lot of struggle.
Have you subscribed to Leading the Future of Work Plus yet? If not, you're missing out. Subscribers of the show get access to bonus episodes like one with Lisa, where she talks about dealing with failure and challenging feedback, why it's crucial to surround yourself with people who disagree with you, and how the role of the CEO and how leadership in general is changing. It's only $4.99 for an entire month, or $49.99 for the year, which is less than the cost of a cup of coffee a month. And in addition to getting this bonus episode with Lisa, you're going to get early access to new episodes, ad-free listening, and lots of bonus episodes, one every week from one of my amazing guests. How can you possibly say no? I hope you decide to subscribe and support the show.